joining this media briefing, including the one that are online. Good morning to you. My name is Noko Mashilu. I'm the Media and Communications Manager at C20. Of course, I've just given the task to be the pilot. And being the pilot, that means that I'm being supported by both C20 communications team and also GCIS communication team. Those are the people that make sure that that put everything together. Allow me to call this media briefing to order and start by saying we're here today to unveil the initial policy draft brief that has been put together by our 14 working groups. Have said so to make sure that you know who is here or who's going to speak so that you could have a clear direction. On my far right, which is your far left, it is our facilitator from employment. His name is Sibusi Somkise. And then followed by C20 Sherpa Mabalani Mufundisi. And next to him is our chairperson, Thulani Chifuta. And then also the last next to me from the culture working group is Princess Nikiwe Bam. And of course, we're also gonna be joined by other speakers online. But before that, our first speaker will be our chairperson, Thulani Chifuta, who will be followed by our Sherpa Mabalani Mfundisi. After him, he'll be followed by our policy content, Kriya, who will be joining us online. Then we will, after she has spoken, we will allow questions and answers. Where there is a need, they will be supported by some of our facilitators who have joined us online. And of course, after that, then we'll have our head of secretariat, Nhlanhla Ndlovu, who will do the closure. And I know that some of you will be looking at how you're going to anchor your stories. You will definitely get an opportunity to have one-on-one interviews. Something that to me, I will never even know what have you asked about. Please allow me to call on stage Chairperson of C20, Thulani Chifuta. Take it away, sir.
Thank you very much, Program Director, Mr. Noko. The Take It Away tagline reminds me of my artistic life when MCs gave us the opportunity to rise to the stage. Good morning and welcome, ladies and gentlemen from the media and our esteemed colleagues who have joined us here and online. Once again, my name is Thulani Chifuta, the chairperson of C20 South Africa, which is the civil society engagement group on the processes of G20. under the presidency of the Republic of South Africa. We have convened today's briefing in order to update the media and society at large on the progress of the work that is being done by C20 as we get ready to make meaningful engagement and contribution to the G20 processes. This time around, we have been intentional about making sure that we bring on board the architects of this work, being the facilitators of the working groups that we have, the 14 working groups that we have. And we do want to reiterate that South African civil society has taken a progressive decision and approach whereby each and every working group has a 3-tier leadership in terms of a South African civil society organization, having co-facilitator from the rest of the African continent, and organizations that operate and exist across the world, that is international organizations. Right from the onset, we want to reiterate upfront that the leadership of C20 South Africa has taken a deliberate stance of being Pan-African in our perspective of dealing and processing all the policy proposals that we are dealing with in this work of C20, leading to G20. So all our policy proposals will be viewed through a Pan-African lens and perspective in approach. We acknowledge that the South African presidency of G20 takes place within a VUCA context of the ever-shifting global geopolitical dynamics. At the very least, the volatile geopolitical developments reflect the vulnerabilities of our economies to the external shocks, almost instantly finding expression on the daily lives and experiences of the people. The ever-dynamic emerging geopolitical developments have a significant disruptive impact on our global economic landscape. The turmoil in the global trade, in our view, must be considered as an opportunity in crisis for the African continent as a whole to expedite the full-scale implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement and leveraging alternative markets. Otherwise, we will be caught unprepared and stuck with products and services that should be enjoyed in the global markets. We must premise this work on the appreciation that all the trade that we do is not done as handouts. There are products and services of high quality standards that we place in the global markets for which the receiving countries must pay for. And so at no point should we believe that we owe or we are owed anything by those who may believe that they no longer need our products and services. The challenge to all of us is that we must not tire in seeking alternative markets that will receive and appreciate and enjoy the good quality products and services that we have to offer as the South African market. The policy proposals that colleagues will get into detail on in the area of education, health, and economic growth show our intentional focus on Human Development Index. And we know that Human Development Index is measured by those three variables of education, health, and economic growth. We are lifting these variables for policy consideration because they are so essential in making sure that our economic growth rises together with our people. We build our own human capacity that will be active players in the growth and development of our own economy. If we don't pay attention to these variables of the Human Development Index, yes, we may have experiences of economic growth, but it will be economic growth for us delivered by others, where we may not have our own people as active economic players in that equation. Hence, the equation of the Human Development Index is very important for us as a starting point. We believe that the challenge of poverty is very real in South Africa, in Africa, the Global South, and many other parts of the world. And we submit that our endeavors on addressing poverty must seek to break the intergenerational cycles of poverty. We must not live on managing poverty from day to day. We must completely eradicate poverty. And that will call on us to appreciate that the implemented interventions must transcend short-termism to include programs that are empirically proven to eradicate poverty, including interventions that are focused on skills, interventions that are focused on social protection, interventions that are focused on employment and entrepreneurship. Evidence suggests that societies that have tackled poverty through a collaboration and combination of those efforts, like China has done, have registered great strides and success in breaking the cycles of poverty and even eradicating it. And those are the lessons we must learn and challenge the governments of the world to work with other social partners in delivering. In order to address the multi-layered challenges of skills development, employment, and economic growth, we believe that we must bring about better coordination and integration of the nexus between skills development, employment, and economic policies. In as far as skills development is concerned, we believe that we must drive a policy agenda where skills development policies are demand-led and driven. In as far as labor market policies, we believe that we must champion active labor market policies that appreciate the role of public employment programs, including the role of public policy in creating an enabling environment for the private sector to thrive and thereby contribute to economic growth that will generate employment. We say this mindful of the fact that growth does not automatically lead to employment. We have lived experiences of what has become called jobless growth. We must be intentional. In that light, and the consideration of that policy nexus, economic policies, which will include both macroeconomic policies and sectoral policies, those must be inclusive in nature, and job rich in leading growth. And we believe that if we can better coordinate and integrate the nexus between those policy pillars, we may yield better results on economic growth, producing the necessary skills that are required by the labor market and the economy, and still stimulate and activate the demand side of the economy in order for it to create the employment that we so much need. The transformation agenda is under siege. The anti-transformation voice keeps on being emboldened and organized without any shame. Previously, people would be shy to stand and champion anti-transformation policies. Now they do it with pride, with a great sense of entitlement that this is ours and ours alone, and others will seek to finish. And that applies to employment and to economic opportunities, to land, access to health, education, and many other services. If you have to look in the South African context alone, the challenges and the anti-transformation voice that we are picking up against the establishment of SETAs, the employment equity, the national health insurance, broad-based Black economic empowerment, and even the newly proposed transformation fund. They are by design no default of the tune that other global economic players are following that lead and example in wanting to micromanage other societies and economies as a leeway of saying, leave this transformation, we will be friends with you. It's like a request of sell your soul and live at our behest. You shall not want. In addition to other instruments, we support the establishment of the instruments such as the DTIC proposed transformation fund, as we believe it can play a strategic and catalytic role in addressing the several economic imperatives. Equality as one of the driving principles of the theme of the South African presidency on G20. That equality cannot be achieved without raising the base of the marginalized people through deliberate implementation of measures that support empowerment and transformation. In the manner in which scales are so unequal in South Africa, minus transformation, you say our society shall forever be. And that cannot be acceptable. And so equality cannot be achieved in that light. We welcome the decision to host the G20 Social Summit, which will be held on 18 to 20 November 2025 in South Africa, taking the lead and the example from Brazil. We see it as a platform that will give more voices an opportunity to be heard as part of the G20 processes. We believe every voice matters. As part of our effort to make a great success of the social summit, the leadership of the C20 South Africa in the course of this week, in a day or two, we will be meeting with one of the core hosts of the G20 Social Summit, being the former Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka. We also wish to state our unwavering support for the South African National Dialogue process. We believe that the social dialogue is going to be a crucial currency in the process of the national dialogue, if the national dialogue is to be meaningful and successful in its outcomes. If anything, the first convention that was recently held over the weekend in UNISA has laid bare the glaring trust deficit that is now growing and graduating into raising questions of legitimacy. If a government can be told, we don't want you, that raises a question of legitimacy. If a government can be told, we don't want you to do this, it raises questions of legitimacy. In a meaningful social dialogue, we should be calling on everyone and anyone to come to the party, so that of those that feel they have an issue to raise against any other party in society, they don't raise it behind their backs. We raise it to them directly. It is the same as those who believe that they hold economic opportunities and therefore their absence in the national dialogue means that we cannot be there with a head in hand to beg for opportunities for them, because they have it all. They have access to education, they have high levels of employment for their young people, they own the economy, they own the land, they produce everything, and they believe we can just decide to walk away. And if you need anything from us, you shall follow us. That cannot be for a successful and a meaningful national dialogue. When the supposed role players become the subjects of debate, the real issues, the plight of the people, gets compromised, it gets suffocated. Leaders and their organizations cannot be the subject of debate. It is the real issues that affect the people that must be the subject of debate. And if we're not careful, when we become the subject, we may divert from the real issues that the people are looking for in the national dialogue. The impatience of the people with the national dialogue must be interpreted to mean they are making a clarion call for the talk of the national dialogue to be linked to action. Talk without action is what is frustrating people. So the conversations of the national dialogue must never be complete until there are clearly defined actions of what will be done to fulfill the very spirit of what we may have identified as the pressing challenges. The caution we must give about the national dialogue is that it should not be a platform where we all enter to make our own demands. It should be a platform where we agree on the most pressing national issues. We collectively define ourselves as part of the solution in addressing those issues. And we say, what will be the role of each of the stakeholders that are around the table in the fulfillment of the same? Otherwise, without that, it will continue to be business as usual. In that note, I will stop there, colleagues. We thought we would highlight some of the high-level strategic issues, which will be followed by some level of detailed policy proposals according to the clusters and the working groups that we have designed, which will be presented by the Sherpa. Over to you, Maps. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairperson. And when you go to these things, people always talk about protocol. So there is none to observe, but you are recognized, you are important to us. I think the last part that the chair ended on, that we can't have a global dialogue in the form of G20 and not have a local dialogue. Because when the fanfare is over and gone, we remain with one South Africa that we have, which must work for all of us. So taking on from the work that we're doing at the global level, the C20 South Africa has attracted over 2,400 organizations from all over the world who are participating in the 14 working groups. Through participation in the working groups, the representatives from this over 2,400 organizations to continue to make inputs on the policy briefs that we will talk about in a few moments through our policy and content technical lead, Grace Kuman. But just to foreground that, to ensure that the end product of the C20 policy pack, which is the coming together of these 14 policy briefs, members which are receiving inputs from members of the working groups, the C20 have constituted an international advisory committee, which we are introducing. It's important for us to also know that the geopolitical issues are not only at government level, even at civil society, they still beset us. So some amongst us believe that they are the custodians of these processes, the G20s in South Africa, and anyone who does not believe that that is the case, it is the case, and we are in charge of that particular process, preparing the ground for civil society in America as we took over from civil society in Brazil. So we're announcing the members of the International Advisory Committee. We ought to have done this quite some time, but we took time. Blending on the words of former Deputy President and President of the Republic, Kgalema Motlanthe, always used to say, we must hurry up slowly. So we hurried up slowly, and now we're at this point. The members of the International Steering Committee is going to be chaired by Comrade Thulani Chefuta. It will include myself as the Sherpa of the C20. We also have the following civil society leaders from across the globe. Ms. Shenali Rajaratnam from the USA, Ms. Alison Richards from the USA, Ms. Guillermina Alanis from Argentina, Dr. Krishna Shri Achuptan from India, Mr. Ramu Damodaran from India. We have Ms. Bini Bichuri from Indonesia. We have Mr. Maftuhan from Indonesia. We also have Her Excellency, former Deputy President of the Gambia, Fatoumata Joko Leisa, and Mr. Vijay Kewarlami from India. These are men and women from the globe that will ensure that they provide the various responsibilities that are bestowed on the International Advisory Committee that oversees the work of the C20 from country to country. They'll provide expert advice and guidance to the C20 leadership, helping shape strategic decisions and outreach. As we bring on stream the esteemed group of global civil society leaders, their collective key responsibilities to the apex leadership of the C20 is twofold. One, to offer expertise on global issues, and two, to promote C20 outcomes to a global audience. In this regard, in September, in a few weeks, the C20 South Africa, through the chairperson and myself as the Sherpa, and other members of the C20 leadership through our working groups, C20 members from the 2,400 organizations will be in New York and on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly to engage further, as we would have had our draft 2 of the policy briefs that we will be consolidating into the policy pack. To ensure that we enhance our work, we have also appointed the following people as knowledge partners, and more will be added as we move closer to a consolidation of our policy briefs. The aim of the C20 is an important platform to ensure that whilst leaders of the world meet to exchange ideas and begin discussions about policy proposals, the voices of the people are included in those engagements. The C20 South Africa work is dependent on the volunteer leadership role by the facilitators and co-facilitators of these 14 working groups, who come from Russia, South Korea, they come from Senegal, they come from Kenya, they are from South Africa, they are from all over the world. Without these men and women, the heavy lifting we have done today would not have been possible. These facilitators are an embodiment of what we would want to see being done through the discussions that will happen on the 22nd and 23rd of November when the G20 leaders meet. We cannot thank them more. It is a human sacrifice of the highest order, the work that they are doing. Some of them are with us, and others are with us virtually. And if there are questions asked of them, they will be able to provide details based on what Ms. Skuman will speak to. Our end goal is that the C20 South Africa summit that should take place between the 12th and the 14th of November. That is our final stage. And immediately after that, the chair spoke about the G20 Social Summit, which we are an integral part of, and we would want it to emerge with a declaration that will be handed over to the G20 president in the person of President Ramaphosa. That declaration will be a sum total of contributions by all other engagement groups. There are 13 official engagement groups, and there are also more that South Africans and others from the globe have felt it is necessary for us to have that. We have identified key moments leading to the C20 summit, from which we have the following. The 9 and 10 October, we'll have the Immigrations Summit. And this is linked to our working group on people-to-people solidarity. It is an important component of the work that we do because we are globally connected, even though we live in different parts of the world. That summit in October of the Immigrations 20 will be followed by another moment, which is the people-to-people soccer bonanza on the 16th of November. We'll have the teams, football teams playing, because we want to take this particular message to the people. We're not going to engage the stadium and say, give us inputs. We already saw it. 1,000 people at UNISA. It's very difficult to get everybody's voices. But we want to say these are the things that we have put out there. We will use the media as well as a platform to communicate what is there and ensure that people enjoy sport, which is something that brings us together. And we will have the Digital Power of Women Summit, which will take place on the 21st and the 22nd of November. Without much ado, I'm now handing over to my colleague who's going to finish and provide us with a meat of the work that the 14 working groups have done. Over to Gray, our policy and content technical lead, who is online. Gray, over to you.
Thank you, Shapa. To our chairperson, Shapa, distinguished members of the media, and all the journalists today. The 14 working groups of the C20 South Africa have now tabled their initial policy draft, reflecting months of grassroots consultation and collaboration spanning across borders. These policy priorities represent the collective call for justice, equity, and transformation. Allow me to highlight some of the core messages emerging from our deliberation. On finance, civil society is calling for urgent reform in global financial governance. Poorer nations must be given a greater voice in decision-making at the World Trade Organization, and the unfair quota system within the International Monetary Fund must end. Our economies cannot grow equitably when the rules remain stacked against us. We are also urging targeted investments in rural economies and through building local value chains, advancing land reform, and scaling up community finance models that draw on indigenous knowledge and that are informed by this preparedness system. Debt for health swap, an end to austerity, and increased public investments in education and primary health care are not luxuries. These are essential lifelines for people's dignity and resilience. Recording in global progress. Governance, we are calling for community data ownership and protection to ensure that technology and knowledge systems serve the people and not the few. South-to-South cooperation and knowledge exchange must be elevated within the G20 processes. Frameworks imposed from the outside without meaningful representation or participation of affected communities must be challenged. True legitimacy can only be built on equity and inclusion. Reflecting on food and poverty, our working group insists that rural livelihoods must be placed at the center of food and job access framework. Agricultural infrastructure, technology, and food system resilience against climate shock must be invested in. Civil society-led initiatives such as cooperative farming, training, and early childhood care and education show us that solutions already exist in our communities. These are waiting to be scaled. We cannot talk of just transition without recognizing the role of the informal economy. Resilience begins with empowering rural communities. Justice must include transparent, community-led restitution, reparation, and the preservation of cultural heritage. Ethical museum practices, legal frameworks, and international cooperation are vital for this. Simultaneously, education and training systems must be aligned with the realities of climate change and advances in the digital economy. Indigenous people must not be spoken for. They must sit at the table in climate negotiations, in education reform, and in cultural policy bodies at the G20 level. At the heart of our agenda is one simple truth. Development must be people-centered, inclusive, and just. Reflecting on human capital development, we are calling for a new commitment to strengthening community-based education and health delivery models. We cannot continue to tolerate gendered barriers in access to employment and education opportunities, nor the persistent neglect of rural communities in service delivery. Inequality remains deeply entrenched, whether spatial, racial, or intersectional, cutting across gender, race, disability, and geography. Our vision is clear. Equity in education, health, and opportunities must be the cornerstone of national and global policies. The transition to greener economies and digital futures must not leave communities behind. We are advocating for sovereign digital public infrastructure, for reforms in climate financing, and the recognition of how technological development and the climate crises are interlinked. Communities need greater capacity for local processing technologies, inclusive digital public services, and digital literacy in schools and workplaces. We are also pushing for gender-responsive climate solutions and inclusive financing mechanisms, recognizing that marginalized groups and women in all our diversity are not spectators, but leaders in shaping our future. These contributions as put forward by the C20 working groups point to interconnected crises. A recognition that the crises we face today do not exist in isolation, that it requires coordinated, urgent action for a better tomorrow. Climate change links to food security, which in turn affects labor, health, and education. Rural digital exclusion continues to widen gaps in learning and healthcare. Nutrition affects early childhood education, which impacts long-term learning outcomes, trapping too many in cycles of poverty. We need integrated, community-informed responses. In responding to climate shock, we must guard against fragmented environmental and social protection. Healthcare workers must be included and empowered as part of our green recovery plan. Our work is ultimately framed by global commitments. We draw on the Sustainable Development Goals, the International Covenant on the Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the UN Convention on Rights of the Child, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We also align with the International Labour Organization's Decent Work Agenda and the World Health Organization's Global Code on the Recruitment of Health Personnel, alongside the vision of universal health coverage and the Alma Ata Declaration on primary health care. These instruments remind us that our struggle is not just political, it is moral and legal. As Africa hosts the C20 in 2025, our work is also rooted in African priorities. We align with the African Union's Agenda 2063, the Auda NACAD Health Innovation Strategy, the SADC protocols on technical and vocational education, and the African Charter on the rights and welfare of the child. These frameworks remind us that Africa is not a passive recipient of global policy. We are active shapers of development pathways for our continent and for the world. I thank you.
Thank you so much. That was the voice from Shepherd's office, Ms. Kriya Skuman, who was just highlighting us some common themes that were found through the policy draft brief. Now I'm going to double check if there is any question that might be raised. And then those who are online, please type your questions on the chat box, and then we'll read them loud to the panelists. Any question in the room? Yes, ma'am. You may go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning. Nobukhanya Ndambo from Eyewitness News. Just a few from me, please. Can we just start with, just as you opened, I think it was like you spoke about adopting a Pan-Africanism approach to C20 as you mold the policies. In South Africa particularly, we have a renewed frustration about undocumented migrants and a number of other issues that continue to come up. What's the approach in addressing the issue of migration when it comes to the African continent? What conversations are you having around the issue of migration and managing that a bit better in terms of the African continent overall? And then in terms of the impact on policy shifts with the new administration in the US, there's obviously been an impact on NGOs across the world, not just South Africa, but across the entire globe. What are the conversations that EC20 is having in terms of the NGOs about cushioning those blows and absorbing the shocks when we have, for example, the withdrawal of funds for NGOs and the impact on the work that it does in the communities, various communities across the world? How does civil society then absorb those shocks and the conversations around that with the rest of the member states, the C20? And then in terms of, again, with the South African example, when it comes to policy misalignment in government, particularly, you have the Government of National Unity, and you spoke about EPEE, NHI as examples of transformation. But you have Government of National Unity that doesn't necessarily agree. The ANC has a different idea of how transformation should happen in the country versus what the DA, for example, what idea the DA has. How do we manage those in terms of making sure that then there's still transformation in an instance where you have the Government of National Unity in South Africa? Thank you.
Should we not take those? Let's take those. Thank you very much, Ms. Ndambo. I think let's take those. They constituted quite a bit. With the Pan-African approach that we have taken, and as you may have heard in the latter parts of the presentations, we have also taken a gendered perspective or approach on our issues, which are about mainstreaming of all marginalized societies and populations. So we must make it clear that the Pan-African approach does not suspend the law. There is no country that can agree to be lawless in any aspect of society. We stand firm, like any other country would do, in saying entry into South Africa must be regulated in the manner in which any other country would do. So in that regard, South African laws must be managed. And when we do that, it should not even be a cause for a fight, right? With it not being a cause for a fight, we have to manage what now is the challenge of entry with improvements in the management of entry now. We have to manage what we already have internally in South Africa. The risks to communities of having to live with people that they cannot account for as to who is this person, where do they come from, what are they doing here, is when considered as a whole, a high risk to the whole of South African society. And so, people must be encouraged to subject themselves to the laws of South Africa and do what is right. What we may not support is illegal assaults, attacks, burning of people, and all of that. And when we raise those, there are things that we must say must be done in our migration challenge, and they must be done by government and its agencies, like border management, law enforcement, and so on. There are equally things that must be done and be done by business and private sector, because it is the private sector that is providing an open space for the very same illegal immigrants to be employed. So they must not employ them. They are complicit to the challenge that we have if they employ them. Equally, it is individual households in communities that voluntarily rent out their houses to some of these illegal people, convert them into spaza shops. Some of them stay in those houses and all of that for income to an individual household at the expense of the community and all other things that would be related to that. What South Africa must not be shy to do is to enforce the law to the extent that where some of those who may also be found not to be illegal may be affected, the system will cleanse them and protect them. We can't be tied our hands and feet into inaction about real experiences and challenges that are confronted by communities. And so, in conclusion on that question, that is why, as C20, we have taken a decision to host what the Sherpa has called a migration summit, which will be attended by South African civil society, which will be attended by civil society from the rest of the African continent. So that these are things that we do not talk about across or over each other's heads, but are things that we engage with on each other around the table and find solution to those. And we believe that that session is going to be the starting point of bigger things to come that may even influence our own national dialogue about how we address those issues. And fortunately, in our design of engagement with the African continent, we have brought on board the African peer review mechanism as an instrument that is existing in many other African countries, so that when we do this work, our intentions are laid out there for all to know and see what is it that we're doing. I will be brief with the subsequent questions. On the impact on policy shift and cushioning others, we believe that we have a lot of advocacy to do with some of the very same governments that have taken a posture that is cutting support into these organizations in civil society. We believe that some of the decisions that have led to the reduction of that support are false reasons. So if governments take decisions, they must express the real reasons so that we engage on the basis of which we may appreciate where do they come from. That is not entitlement. But beyond that, we are making a clarion call for governments to start making domestic investments in education and health so that the development of their own communities and society as a whole does not largely depend on external aid. Yes, there is role for aid, which must be buttressed with development, but the gaps that are emerging, there must be a national discourse that says, how do we begin to close that gap? In the South African context, we believe that money that is going into wastage can actually hold gap for monies that have been taken away from the NGOs that are doing an excellent job in the health space. We believe that other existing funding instruments like the National Lotteries Commission, development finance institutions should also be redirected to close those funding gaps in order to achieve our domestic imperatives as a society. When this work is done, it is done by NGOs to provide public services that under normal circumstances would have been provided by governments in some instances. And so what we believe should be done is that the funds and even the public funds must follow the functions that government should be delivering in terms of the public services. And therefore, some of the funds that are in the public purse must be redirected, not for the benefit of the NGOs, but to support and enable these NGOs to be able to deliver these public goods and services that the communities need so much. There's something that only NGOs can do that governments cannot do, even in terms of agility, of responsiveness to the crisis in communities. There are communities that may not have a school, that may not have a municipal office, that may not have a university or any public institution, but they will have a church, for example. And that is part of the social capital that we are saying must be supported to be repositioned to respond to the plight and the challenges of those communities with the minimum support that the public funds can support, can provide. On GNU, we believe that it is civil society and the whole of society that must begin to hold the GNU accountable. There are principles that the GNU has agreed on. We must hold them accountable for the fulfillment of those principles. One of those principles is evidence-based decision-making and policy-making. When suddenly evidence suggests that there are inequalities, there are those who have better access to education, skills, employment, economy, land than others, that evidence cannot be wished away. The policy response must seek to address not the perceived problem, but the empirical problem that the evidence is suggesting exists. Never mind the policy issues where the political parties in GNU disagree. Take the one where they all agree. There is no political party in South Africa that contested the 2024 national and provincial elections that did not have employment or job creation as its apex priority. Now, all these parties combined in GNU are given an opportunity to deliver on that one priority that they all agree on. Why is it not moving? And so, the diversion of our attention on policy differences must be viewed as disservice to communities in South Africa. The narrative about, yes, we all agree on transformation, but not in this way, in that other way, is dragging us a disruptive route which wants us to see the color of the t-shirts that the political parties are wearing, which as a society we must refuse to see. We must see the outcomes of the transformation agenda, regardless of who is given which responsibility in the government of national unity. And so we believe that on the final analysis, transformation is a non-negotiable. If you want public office, you have no option out to say we don't agree with transformation in this or that other way. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. And the next question comes from the chat online. And then it says, what is the position of C20 on indigenous leadership in G20? And then the next question, also online, it says, there is too much policies. Can we have time frames and implementation plan that is not going to take too long? For now, those are the two questions that comes from online.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mashilo. I've introduced before, I'm Princess Nikki Wabam, the facilitator for the cultural recognition, cultural diversity recognition and embracement. I think I'll just tackle maybe the two questions that you've just raised. One of our priority areas include the recognition and inclusion of indigenous peoples and traditional authorities. As we know that as the C20, we, as our chairperson also mentioned, that we are looking into the communities that are marginalized. We know that even continentally, we have communities that have got no access to any government services or even being known as those communities as existing in the land. So we are looking into the legal, political, and cultural recognition of indigenous governance systems. And also we are calling for the equal partnership between state and traditional leaders. So they are also included in our policy brief. We also, one of the recommendations is the affirmation of rights to land, language, and identity in line with UNDRIP. So we know that our indigenous people also have their indigenous languages that are very useful in terms of communication, and also in our education system. We need to recognize such languages and also preserve our languages. In terms of the policies, I'm just going to highlight this as well because Mr. Mashilo have read it as one of the questions. We have also called for the policy overhaul and inclusive governance. There are too many policies that are outdated. And we also, in our policy recommendations here in South Africa, there are acts, even in the constitution, that really limit the participation of traditional leaders in the governance. So we want to replace those outdated colonial era laws with frameworks that empower traditional leaders as equal partners in governance. So we know that most of these policies, they are developed to actually favor the colonial people, which we are now in the process of calling for the restoration and also fighting for the equality, because most of them are not talking to our equality. They are not talking to economic development. We are also calling for the IKS economies, which is indigenous knowledge and practicality in our traditional medicine. So all of these policies that were there before, they never recognized our indigenous knowledge. They never actually put our indigenous people as economic drivers of the communities that they lead. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Princess. From the room, is there any question? Yes, please, you may go ahead. You're noted. Yeah.
Mr. Shibu just spoke about eradicating poverty. That's my first question. If he says that we have to eradicate poverty, I just want to know, it's been such a long time, probably over, let's say, a decade of unemployment in South Africa. I just want to know what change or what any other idea that they're taking forward to the G20 in terms of unemployment, the unemployment rate in South Africa, and from the different C20 clusters, which are emerging policies issues, gaining the most traction. And how is the C20 ensuring that these voices translate into concrete recommendations for the G20 agenda? Thank you.
It's taking it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chair, Mr. Mashilo. I think that's a very important question. I think more important than the discussion on unemployment in this country and in the global South is a discussion that have been ignored for a very long time. I want to just say that it's the first time in the G20 that the issue of employment opportunities and retention is on the agenda. And that is a reflection of what the global South experiences are. We have, for instance, in South Africa, but across the globe, across the globe, on the agenda, I attended the employment working group in George that was hosted by the Department of Employment and Labor and the minister's process. Almost every country, not almost, actually every country, even the ones that have very low level of unemployment, raised the issue of how they using the tripartite alliance, which is government, business, labor, to redress the issue of unemployment. And key amongst them was the implementation of the public employment program. Even countries with your 5% unemployment rate apply the public employment program as a means or to clear the unemployment issue. India, for instance, have a rural public employment program that employ over 40 million people. But that's looking at how do you address the issue at hand. And India identified that the unemployment was much more prevalent in rural areas, and they use the public employment program to address that. And we're saying that in South Africa, there is a huge opportunity to use that along with other means, along with what business is doing, the private sector is doing, to use the public employment program, for instance, as I don't want to say it's a cornerstone, but as a stepping stone or as a ground level kind of assistance to communities prioritizing the most deprived communities, like your rural communities, your township communities, your informal communities. But I think that's one of the ways that government needs to begin to invest more in rural areas, but invest more in public employment program by creating the infrastructure for public employment program to thrive. For instance, if you have public employment program and you have agricultural development happening in rural areas, put the infrastructure, put the irrigation system, bring the tools of trade that will allow not just the creation of the public employment program, but the retention of such, so that it goes on for a long time, and you keep on exiting people from the public employment program once they developed enough to stand on their own and bring in new one. And I think that should be the starting point in the global south and in South Africa in particular. Thank you.
Thank you so much, leadership. You have been noted. And then before I come to you, I just want to read another question from online, so that if one of our facilitator from this working group is available, then we can prepare. So the question says, how is the C20 health-related pillars working groups interest-driven linking with the main G20 health working group? Are they exclusively operating? How are both groups' drives aligned together for submission of the Ministers of Health for consideration? Okay. Comrade Nombaza, can you kindly take this question? May I read once more again? How is the C20 health-related pillars working groups interest-driven linking with the main G20 health working group? Are they exclusively operating? How are both groups' drives aligned together for submission to the Ministers of Health for consideration? Nambasa, did you get the question? Okay, in the meantime, can I take your question, please? Yeah. Oh, you didn't raise your hand?
I've forgotten what it was.
Okay, that's fine. No. Yeah.
I forgot what the one was. But can we just maybe from the colleagues that are online get a sense from the other countries about the attitudes of civil society in the different countries outside of South Africa? We obviously will have a South African perspective, but just for them to maybe speak to us from the other countries, the challenges, whether or not they're more or less the same as South African issues, how they're in their own countries, how those are being addressed there, the lessons that the countries are learning from each other in terms of the approaches to addressing those issues, and just generally the attitudes of South Africans in the different countries that are represented in C20, please. Thank you.
There's Manziko Matema from Malawi, Wanjuki from Kenya. You can call them.
Okay. From Kenya, can we get any response from the question? Wanjuki.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're dialing in from. There were a series of questions asked. Through the chair, Shapa, would you want to guide with specific questions you'd like me to respond to?
Can you kindly ask your question again?
Is it audible?
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so the question was really just to get a sense from the different countries, please, in terms of the attitudes of civil society, what challenges that they're facing. Are they more or less the same as the South African issues? What sort of lessons are the different countries learning from each other at C20 in terms of addressing the common challenges, and what other issues are being faced by the different countries represented under C20?
Thank you very much. So I didn't get your name, but allow me first to introduce myself. My name is Wanjiko Wairia. Board chair of Oxfam Kenya, privileged to be serving as a lead facilitator for Working Group 14, Energy Just Transition, Environment and Climate Sustainability. So allow me to respond to the question from that specific lens. First things first, the fact that climate and the energy question around poverty is not only a South African issue, it's a global issue actually. So when we look at what those numbers look like, the civil society, both here in Kenya and from what I'm hearing in South Africa, and when I speak to the engagements that we've had with the different constituents, the challenges are the same. The lens is what tends to be different. For example, when you speak to matters of critical minerals, that is probably seems to be a bigger question in South Africa because of the richness of your corridor, but it spans right across. When we speak in terms of the size of the civil space, I saw questions in the chat. I'm online, and there's a question in terms of the shrinking of the civil society space and what are we doing about it. The sentiments remain the same also in Kenya and also across Africa and in the global south specifically. So whereas the specifics and the nuances are going to be slightly different because we are really all privileged that South Africa is hosting the G20, you still find that the challenges are the same. Magnitude on different elements are different, but the challenges that we are facing are extremely the same. So the question is, how can we collate and be one voice, be one Africa, one people, and be able to drive a global agenda where we're very clear about what's the value that we bring to the table, and making sure it matters that drive. I think one of my co-facilitators, I think, spoke on matters of employment and labor, is that how we're ensuring that our people are not left out of this bigger conversation. So that would be my response. I hope I've answered your questions. Through the chair, shuffle back to you.
Thank you so much, leadership. Can I just double check on the line? Masiko Matema from Malawi, who will also respond. Thank you. Good.
Thank you so much. Thank you, the team, for inviting. I'm the co-facilitator for group number 7, with group number 7, looking at the resilience in terms of our community case. I want to agree with Wanjiko because we're looking at the present disaster risk reduction and resilience in Africa. And listening to the South African experience at Malawi, as you know that our resilience to disaster risk reduction, I think some of the commonalities are there that I think what South Africa is bearing, but also Malawi and other African countries, but also looking at the planning framework, which we have gone through. There are some commonalities in terms of how we adapt to climate shock, but also how our financing for climate is being addressed. Because as you know, as African countries, we're being overrun of the donor countries, which now is dwindling. It's good that the policy officials are also trying to address issues around how do we adapt and if you are resilient, looking at the dwindling of foreign finance mechanisms we have at the moment. So yes, they are similar because I know that South Africa also had your own experience in climate shock, but also in terms of shortages to some water water resource because of different climate shocks. But also in Malawi, as you know, Mozambique and other countries, we had cyclone Freddy, but also other cyclones which have affected Southern Africa and other countries. In terms of the physical space and civil society, I think we also have some commonalities that other countries, the stifling of physical space, like what is happening also to other countries and civil society and other stuff. But in Malawi, we have tried to push and make sure that there's no stifle of civil society space and voices, but still we see that some commonalities because some governments are willing to work with civil society, other governments are not willing, depending with their model of governance. So I can foresee that in terms of governance, in terms of resilience, in terms of supporting the communities to be able to be supported, I think there are some commonalities even in our point of view, also trying to address that. Thank you, Chair, for allowing us to share from our book, but also our experience. Over.
Thank you so much, Comrade Maziko. I just want to read again the question on health. Oh, this Antonio. Okay. Comrade Antonio, please take this question. It says, yeah. Oh, okay. Another. Okay. All right.
Yes.
You may go ahead. You may go ahead. We can't hear you. Your line is not clear, Comrade Antonio.
Sorry, I was having a bit of difficulty in hearing. So I don't know if you could post the questions here on the chat.
Yeah, we just want to find the feeling about the whole, the feeling about the civil society in your country.
Well, in my country, well, I'm reaching out here from the UK, but there's been. One second.
Your line is not good. We can't hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Please keep it that way.
Well, the feeling that it's been having and shared is that it comes across that there's concern and urgency on the civic space, especially raising the digital surveillance and threats to judicial independence. There's been frustrated, very assertive, and all the team is actually trying to push the G20 states to move beyond rhetoric and address their own governance failings. Strategic and solutions oriented. There's been a lot of calling for targeted action for recommendations to protect, enforce, mandate, and also inclusive and justice seeking. So emphasizing marginalizing voices. There's been a lot of stories being shared of people that are really in a very, challenging situation. And there's some other points that are starting to emerge, like solidarity-driven, so encouraging strong South-South accountability in cross-border civil society protection networks. Okay, so this is what I've been seeing right now, and I don't know if it answers your questions.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Comrade Antonio. I just want to read again that question from about health. How is the C20 health-related pillars working groups interest-driven linking with the main G20 health working group? Are they exclusively operating? How are both groups drive align together for submission to the Minister of Health for consideration? Comrade Nombasa, please come forward.
Can we check it?
No, no, can't find her on the name. Maybe she's a different.
Where's the question?
That's the question.
Okay, Comrade Nombasa is also attending a funeral as I'm talking to her, but hopefully you can get her there to connect operator. Are you able to get her? I don't want to steal her thunder. Nombasa, Kuluwe, Sizwe, the one who declined earlier. Comrade Nombasa, can you accept the request for you to respond? And then we'll ask the question again once you. Is she online? Comrade Nombasa, the question is how is the C20 health related pillars or working groups interest driven linking with the main G20 health working group? Are they exclusively operating? How are both groups driven or how are both groups drive alignment together with submission to the Minister of Health for consideration? That's the question. Sizwe, did you get us? We will answer on your behalf. But so to the respondent, the
Hello?
yes, you can speak now.
Yes, you didn't unmute me and you wanted me to speak.
Speak now. You are unmuted. We can hear you from this side.
Yes, in terms of the, you can hear me. In terms of the health working group for the G20 and the critical health for all for under C20, I, as a focal person or the lead facilitator for the Equitable for Health Working Group, will be invited to attend the official G20 meetings. So what we did from the 4 meetings that we have attended with the Sherpa, we make sure that the issues is of advocacy that were coming off the engagements of the working group members were being tabled as advocacy questions and even the inputs that we wanted the health working group to consider. And we also were part of the panelists in the last meeting where the engagement was on accessibility, affordability, and availability of medicines, looking at the regional manufacturing and just bringing the health commodities to the people. So that's how we have been engaged. We make sure that also because the topics that they touched from so that the global initiatives like the intentional support for the Global Fund to make sure that TB, malaria, and plan for. So
there's been that interaction in terms of the C20 hub working group with the G20 official one. So it is the engagement is ongoing. We are forcing to be attending the meeting, the last meeting by November, where then we were hoping in that meeting we'll be able to take now, because we will be nearing the final draft of our policy brief. So we'll be taking also again the issues that are coming out of the brief and making sure that we deliberate on those and bring it to forth, so that we make sure that civil society and community voices are being heard in part of what is being discussed in the G20 table. Thank you.
No, thank you, Comrade Numbers. I just wanted to add as well on that question that we have the C20 working groups, which I've said it's constituted by over 2,400 organizations and members. People choose which working group they have expertise to contribute to. Now, there is the government working groups, which is made up of the host country and the 19 G20 members, as well as invited countries. Some of those platforms are easy to navigate, others are difficult. Easy in that, Comrade Busiso, the employment working group lead, there was the employment working group meeting in George towards in July. We were given access to the meeting, including the ministerial meeting. No problem. The following week, Wanjiku came from Kenya, only to be barred to not participate in the energy working group G20 meeting. Even those that civil society that were in that meeting, they were ejected from that particular meeting because there seems to be some things that are too sensitive for us to hear. But our approach is that we have our own processes where we are developing our policies to influence governments, and where we agree, we need to amplify the things that we agree on. Because at the end of the day, what do we want? We want to see progress, and progress means that our ideas are coming together and we're agreeing to a common solution. We must ululate about that. But where we don't agree, we will retain our independence and say the things that governments don't want to hear from us. So we have been engaging with DERCO to ensure that those meetings that are remaining for the government working group meetings, as civil society, C20 formal engagement groups and other engagement groups, we must be allowed into those particular platforms. Comrade Nombasa spoke about the work we have been doing with the health working group, where there could be many contestations, but they have been very receptive of us to come into that particular space and contribute. And there are those things that we don't agree with, we actually say what we don't basically agree on. But at the end of the day, these policy briefs from the working groups will be a policy pack that civil society will provide to governments with the aim of influencing what the G20 leaders will agree as the next step. I mean, the next country that's hosting is the USA. We don't even know what their attitude is, at least judging from their decision last week. We heard that initially they had said they are not coming at the highest level. They are not coming. The president, unless he announces otherwise, President Trump is not coming. The foreign minister or the secretary of state is not coming. But they've now said that they are going to send delegates at the undersecretary, which means the deputy minister level, to participate in this process. So from having taken that particular position, they have now come at least towards the center so that they are not passed by in terms of this process. So others view our push to get our issues into the official processes as selling our souls. No, we have no soul to sell. We have our issues to advocate for communities, and part of that process that if and where we agree, let's amplify that, because if there is nothing for me and you to fight about, why are we fighting? But if there are things that we don't agree on, of course, we will sit on opposite fences and try to come to a common position around that. So I will end there and invite Ntate Nuku for the last question for the chair from your thing.
I've noted it.
Oh.
Before I read this question, can I kindly find out if there is any question in the room? Okay.
It's not answered. I've noted it.
Okay, please go ahead.
As the C20 is preparing to engage with the G20 process, how would you assess the current state of readiness in terms of advocacy coordination and alignment across civil society globally? Thank you.
Thank you so much. When people they do good, we need to acknowledge them. So this message or this question says, thank you to all the hardworking team that organized the briefing. My question is for the chairperson, Chifuta. What message will you take to the United Nations General Assembly in September, given the White House posture to the SAG20 presidency? What will success look like at the end of the social summit in November?
Well, I think we can safely say now in conclusion, the question about global coordination is an ongoing task. We believe we're in a much better position now than we were when we went to our first policy dialogue in June 2025 in Sandton. We believe we have been able to find traction from many other parts of the world than where we were in June 2025. We believe that the platform we had a very strategic opportunity as C20, in the sense that when we concluded our own policy dialogue on the 22nd of June 2025, the meeting of Sherpas of all G20 governments was commencing in Sun City on the 24th. We had an opportunity of being on the floor to present all our issues. And true to what we stand for, we don't want to be liked on the basis of the color of the jacket we wear and all of that. Engage us on the strength of our ideas and the policy proposals that we're making. The governments of the world organized under G20 actually expressed it there and there, that we think there are interesting issues that are emerging from civil society, such that we would want our own country civil societies to participate. By the time we went to the the policy dialogue we had in Sandton, we had about 1,900 organizations that were registered. The 2,400 that the Sherpa is reporting is as a result of the work we do finding traction and many other organizations raising their hand to say, we believe we have a contribution to make, and the door is not closed. And so that coordination amongst civil society is what is propelling us towards the second iteration of our policy pack, which we are going to take into broad and wide consultation and engagement. So when we go to UNGA, our primary focus will be stakeholder mobilization on the basis of the second iteration of our policy pack. We will be changing gear into community-based engagements where people can come in, walk in without an invitation, make their inputs, because we believe every voice counts or matters. And so what we will do as part of that, ultimately, when it is all said and done, We want that a person whom will not have an opportunity to be in the social summit and in the summit of the heads of states to relate to the issues that we'll be presenting. They must say, even if I'm not there, I can hear the sound of the issues we raised with the leadership of C20, finding expression in those meetings. The same applies to the social summit, as the question is asking as to what does success look like. The social summit must provide space and opportunity for voices that would have otherwise not be given a platform to be expressed. We have to be intentional about going broad and wide about the sectors of society that are invited to be in the flow of the social summit. The success of the social summit for us must be meaningful in the sense that the issues that emerge from the social summit must find expression in the mainstream outcome documents that the governments will be agreeing about. Ultimately, it is the purpose of all these engagement groups to influence the mainstream government outcome documents. And again, that success for us will not only end with what is agreed upon, it will transcend to include an articulation of what are the action steps that must follow in order to give meaning to this which we are agreeing upon as social partners and even the mainstream outcome document. When we go to UNGA, the first message we are taking is that South Africa is an African country that is abuzz with opportunities. It's a beautiful country that stands ready to host G20 most successfully than many other countries in the developed world. That's the first thing we're taking to the stakeholders that will be in UNGA. The second message we are taking is that all stakeholders of the South African society stand ready to welcome and embrace the visitors of the world, to have a taste and experience of our country and the continent. Thirdly, we are taking a message that there are African home-brewed policy proposals that stand as proposed solutions to the plight of the communities of the world, which we want to stand side by side with all other social partners as C20 in nudging those into fruition. The fourth message we're taking to UNGA is that we refuse to define the success of our presidency on the basis of who comes and who does not come. The minute you hinge the success of policy proposals on the individuals who are incumbents in office today, it's the death of the success of the very same policy proposals we are advocating for. Back to the very first point we made. We want to engage the countries of the world on the strength of the ideas that we are championing, regardless of who is there. And lastly, the biggest message we drive is that there may be tensions that may exist between governments. As civil society, we stand a special opportunity in the life of society, where we can drive and promote people's to people's diplomacy that may create bonds of common understanding at a people to people level, at civil society level, that may go to influence the posture that is taken by the governments that lead us from the respective countries where we come from. And so, on the basis of that, we believe that we will be able to attract a critical mass of stakeholders that will come to witness the great success that the presidency of South Africa of G20 will be. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. Our head of secretariat was supposed to be doing the closure, but however, due to technical problems, he won't be doing the closure. I would like to thank everybody from the leaders, comrades, colleagues, media houses, for your time. We really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming through. And then we hope that we are going to make sure that the voices of civil society is going to be heard through you. Have said so, this meeting has been adjourned. And please join us for some refreshments. And I'm sure Visile will lead us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.